Hello from the nation's capital. I'm Stu Nagurka along with Lauren Reedy. Today we'll be speaking with Cynthia New, a native of Alpine, Texas. She went to high school in Alpine and worked at the Alpine Avalanche, her first break in journalism. She went on to receive several journalism scholarships to attend the University of Texas at El Paso. And after graduation, she worked as a reporter and worked her way up to a position of an assistant an assistant editor at the El Paso Times, and then made the difficult transition from print journalism to broadcast journalism at a television station in El Paso. Along the way, she has received several awards that we'll mention. The Women's Political Caucus in Texas named her the most outstanding woman in the news media, and the Executive Women's Council in El Paso named her Outstanding Career Woman. She has also served as the president of the El Paso Press Club, the second woman to ever do so. She left El Paso in 1975 to come to Washington, where she thought that journalism could best be, a field of journalism could be best experienced. And she found work as a reporter and went back to Texas 4 years later and decided to make the move to Washington again in 1980 to start her own business. And this is where she's been ever since. Lauren?
Thank you, Stu. Cynthia, let's start out. Could you tell us what comes to mind when you think of leadership? What should a leader be?
Absolutely can't be chicken, that's for sure. A leader has to have a very decisive mind, commitment. You have to believe in what it is that you're in pursuit of, whether you're trying to win a war, whether you're trying to get a story, whether you're trying to win a sweetheart. You have to be committed to the program. Now, if you allow anything to deviate your attention, you're finished. You'll never make it. Frequently, I will describe it as a horse with blinders, and you're absolutely goal-oriented, no matter what, as long as what you do is decent, honest, and moral. Yes.
Why did you choose the field of journalism in which to pursue a career?
When I was in high school, there was a column that was written in the local paper called Teen Talk. And it was written by a woman who was the head cheerleader, or girl in that case. And this girl would always put in the Teen Talk column the names of the captain of the football team and the quarterback and all the other head cheerleaders, and once in a while the twirlers got their names in there. But they never had the names of those rest of us who went to high school, and in the whole high school there were 300 kids. So I said to my girlfriend, Gretna Harrison, look, it's not right. News media belongs to everyone, and everyone's name needs to be in the paper, and we're all contributing to society, and we need to be in the paper. And I'm going to get that column. I'm going to get Teen Talk, and I'm going to write it. And she said, get out of here, Cynthia. You'll never, ever be able to do that. I mean, it's headed down from head cheerleader to head cheerleader. You know, you have to be the most popular girl in the school. And I said, watch this. I'm going to get this column. And I promptly, at the age of 13, went into the newspaper, convinced the editor of the newspaper that he needed to give me a job. And I type, and I wrote, and put all the ads in, and do all the layup, and do all the makeup. Makeup, we called it in those days. That's right, make up the papers. And I said, after I endeared myself to the editor, working for 50 cents an hour, I approached him and I said, Mr. Glasscock, you know, it's ridiculous for you to pay that head cheerleader all that money to do that column, $1.50 a week. You can save that $6 or $7 a month by letting me write the column. I'm already here. I'm in-house. No problem. I'll type it right up. I go to the same school with the same kids she does. I'll do it and it won't cost you anything. He said, well, you know, Cynthia, that's a good idea. So effective immediately, you're going to write the column. Well, when I sat down, I can't tell you the pleasure that it gave me to tell this particular girl, thank you so much for bringing this column. You don't have to write it anymore. And I sat down then and began to write Teen Talk. And the kids were so happy to have their names in the paper. And I realized that access to the media is power. It means that you have the ability to influence how people think, and most of all, you have the power to allow other people to know how other people think. And that's what I liked. exchanging and progressing ideas between people.
And you chose to focus your journalism career here in Washington on an independent news bureau. Why is it so successful? Why is Sun World Satellite News? What's the key to success in an independent news bureau?
You know, I'm happy to say there are 200 people who will say it is successful. But there's probably every night, how come I feel like when I go to bed I'm thinking about the other 200 people who say, come on, come on, come on. Why is it successful? It's successful, Lauren, because you know what? Rural America does not need Washington. Local television does not need the networks. We don't need it anymore. We have satellites, we have immediate technology, we have immediate access to Washington. We'll start with the telephone. You see, constituents can pick up the phone and call their congressman. Now the TV stations can call up and speak to us, and we'll go talk to the congressman directly. We don't need the networks.
You saw the need for a company like Sunworld, but how do you go about starting a company in a town that's obviously very strange to you when you knew no one?
Oh, it's very easy. Look, very easy. Every single town has a mayor and a city council and people who are politically active. I don't care how big or small the town is, right? So all I did is I adapted what it took to cover the mayor, the city council, and the people who are interested in politics in one town, and the towns just got progressively bigger. And here we are in Washington. We have a president and we have a city council. We have Congress, and we have people who are politically aware.
Interviewing a mayor and interviewing a congressman, certainly there's not too much difference, but how do you go about, how does a gal from West Texas come to Washington and rub shoulders with the big boys and actually start a company?
You have to have resolve. I wanted the politicians to be accountable to the people who elected them. So I thought to myself, now Cynthia, you care very much about politics. Who do you know cares very much about politics besides the TV stations? Of course, all of the news directors that I knew, I had convinced the television stations that what we needed to do, one station could not come up with $250,000 to open up its own news bureau in Washington. It just didn't have that kind of money. But if 3 or 4 stations put together their money, then they could open up a bureau in Washington. So I said, okay, I will go to San Antonio, Albuquerque. I was in El Paso and Tucson. And I'll talk to these stations, and while we do not have a network allegiance or corporate allegiance, we do have news allegiance. We all care about Hispanic news. We all care about military. We all care about illegal aliens, border crossings, etc., etc. I put those together, and then I said, all right, I will go to Washington and I will represent these television stations because I, as a reporter in Washington who comes from this part of the country, will have expertise and knowledge of this area. When these people are talking to me about green cards, I'll know what they're talking about, and I have credibility with them because they know I come from where they are. They can explain it to me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I came to Washington to set up the company with the television stations already committed for a year, and I came with the backing of the Sun World Corporation, of which Mr. Fred Hervey is chairman of the company, chairman of the board, because he too cares as much about politics as I care about politics. And he was willing to support me financially in this, what we considered then to be a novel idea. Now there's hundreds of people doing what we're doing.
In the bureaus, I think you touched on this before. What is the intrinsic value of a bureau? What are you delivering home that the networks can't deliver?
We're giving them immediate access to their politician. He's accountable immediately. What I like to do is get the politicians on the air before the vote is taken. The best example I can think of is Contra Aid. We told our people the night before the Contra Aid vote how their individual members of Congress planned to vote on Contra Aid. That way, the constituents at home have at least 12, sometimes 24 hours. They can call the congressman and say, don't vote that way. I do want contra aid, or I do not want you to vote for contra aid. You see, I believe in preventative politics as opposed to reactionary politics. We've helped that way. We have also helped by being able to get to the big guys and say, excuse me, talk to the head of immigration, for instance, Alan Nelson, or we can talk to George Schultz, and we can ask them specifically, why are you doing this to Fort Bliss? Why are you doing this to Lackland Air Force Base? We don't want those B-1 bombers put in there, or we do want those B-1 bombers in there. The big guys on the Supreme Court, the people in the White House, the people in the Congress, Tip O'Neill, who is now gone, but they become more familiar with El Paso, with San Antonio, with Biloxi, Mississippi, because we go in there and we hold them accountable to our individual towns.
Cynthia, you've really forged a place for yourself in journalism and as far as your career goes, but journalism is a tough, competitive field, and it's getting more competitive every year. What advice would you give to young people who wanted to get into the field of journalism?
Absolutely, positively. If you have a weak heart or a weak stomach, or if you have sensitive feelings, do not, under any circumstances, get into this ball game, because this is big time. And nobody means anything personal by it. Just because somebody calls you a helium airhead one day, it doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means that on this particular story, on this particular assignment, you were a helium airhead. It's nothing personal. It's exciting. It's like a game. You know, I played basketball in high school. I had a great time at it, and actually I was quite good at it. Loved it. This is a competitive ball game. So you've got to be thick-skinned, and of course you have to be, I say it without any hesitation, you must be aggressive.
What courses would you suggest a young person take to prepare themselves, not so much for journalism, but a leadership position in journalism?
First of all, you've got to be able to speak, so take a lot of speech. Learn to speak up. You must have the highest degree that you can possibly get in English. If you can't speak correctly or you can't write correctly, forget it. You're finished. Equally important, I want you to take some business courses, because I don't care how great is your byline, it don't mean a thing if you can't meet the bottom line. That's the name of the game. Journalism, television, radio, newspapers, they're businesses, they're in the business to make money. Get serious. You have to be totally conscious at all times of the bottom line.
With personnel turnover so high in this business, people come in and go, they move up. It's a continually going uphill on the ladder game. How do you find delegating responsibilities in your bureau? Is it difficult? Is it difficult to keep the business going?
I have an outstanding team. This is the best team that I've ever had. This is the best group of people with whom I have ever worked, ever in my lifetime, and I've worked with a lot of them. But I believe the reason why we have the best team ever compiled now is because through mistakes in the past, I'm finally starting to catch on about how to recognize and hire good people. Delegating, that's the biggest problem I've ever had, and you can't convince me ever that managers everywhere don't have that problem when they're starting out, because you always feel like nobody can do it as well as I can do it. And it's easier for me just to go ahead and do it than it is to try to explain to someone else how to do it. That's the kiss of death. You're finished as a manager if you can't get over that hump. The reason that it's been so difficult for me to give that up, to go ahead and delegate, is because, my goodness, did you ever see that movie that Walt Disney produced, created? It was called The Black Hole. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I missed that one.
You missed that? All right. It's this big thing in space, you know, that really and truly exists, but things disappear into that black hole and it's never ever seen again, like whole universes, right? So I kid my staff and I say, yeah, I'm afraid to delegate this because frequently what I have delegated has ended up in Walt Disney's black hole. But you have to overcome that. You have to delegate. And when you find the person to whom you can delegate it and it comes back to you like a boomerang, especially in the same day, keep that person. That person is excellent.
How do you describe your style of leadership? We've talked about leadership, but if you can just zero in on what your style is. And
Well, I think that's an unfair question to ask me. Of course, I'm going to say I'm casual and calm and poised, and I'm really cool and collected. I think the better person to ask my style should be you or Lauren.
But okay, let me re-ask the question. What would you like your style to be as a leader, and how do you think that differs from what it is in reality?
Oh, Stu, I'm so proud of you. That's what I've always liked about you, Stu. You're such a diplomat. Good for you, Mr. Nagurka. Now you know why I have you. You're excellent. You're excellent. Now, we have a little bit of time. I want to talk about this. One of probably the main reason that I hired Lauren Reedy to come to work with us is because Lauren Reedy is such a lady. She's very poised, very gracious. And all my life, I have always truly admired women who were gracious and ladylike while being effective. I'm effective, but I'm always not as poised and ladylike as I would like to be. My particular style of management is, if you're not busy, you're not doing anything. And if you're not doing anything, please, I don't want you around. Every single minute counts. We're working against a deadline. I mean, I'm telling you, the first deadline hits at 4 o'clock, the next one hits at 5:30, the next one hits at 6 o'clock, and we're singing, we got to make a quota every day. This is like working in a manufacturing company, and we have a quota. Every single person has to contribute, and either you're contributing, and that is that you're working, or you're out. That's it. My management style is to keep the machinery going as best as I can, keep it all producing, and to teach people to make the best management of their time that they possibly can. I'm convinced that unless you're not doing 2 things at one time, you're not using your time wisely. You must be doing at least 2 things at one time.
Cynthia, was there one person, or even maybe more than one person, who inspired you in your lifetime?
I always wanted to have my own business, and I derived at that concept because of my parents. My mother and my father established their own business, and I just never thought that it would ever be any other way than I would try to own and operate my own business, and I'm definitely working toward that goal. But the inspiration came from my folks, no question about it, from my parents, no question.
How do you pattern yourself after anyone in particular now?
Well, I probably behaved just like my mother, and I wanted to, of course, my mother is a brilliantly successful businesswoman. She does circles around me. I mean, you know, what I'm doing is like compared to her. But yes, I wanted to emulate her capabilities. I just thought maybe I'd like to temper them a little bit by, as I mentioned to you earlier, by being more, hello, darling, but that hasn't come about. My mentor now, besides my mother, I'd have to say, of course, would be Mr. Hervey and Mr. Orrick. Now we have the president of the Sun World Corporation named Rick Orrick, and he is retired from the Marine Corps. Now there is a man who definitely knows how to be a leader. He says to me on any number of occasions, you know, Cynthia, the signal that someone is a leader is that whatever the leader is leading can operate at maximum, at full optimum, without the presence of the leader. You see, and that's the goal that I am aspiring to, that the company will run beautifully, fluidly, capably, and richly without my presence.
But how do you ensure that your presence stays on if things are running so smoothly?
Well, because then I would want to go on to, I want to keep climbing up, you see. I wouldn't leave the company. I'm trying to break out now into a new area for the company. Now, we've definitely developed an expertise in how to get the national news and give it the local perspective. We want to spread that capability to even more parts of the country than we already broadcast in. And I'm happy to say that there's hardly, well, I believe Alaska is the only state in the Union to which we have not broadcast. We're even now into Honolulu, Hawaii. So I want to perfect that system for the company, keep going, and y'all are doing an outstanding job, and then I'm going to try to go up and get us more what we call now in the television news business electronic news videos.
Everyone has a personal life, a social life, and a business life. How do you manage to work the three into your lifestyle? How would you prioritize your life?
I can only speak for myself, and I don't pretend for a moment to speak to anyone else. Absolutely, without question, number one is business. Career first. Absolutely, no questions, bar none. I am a mother. I have an outstanding son, as we all have outstanding children, right? And certainly he is as important to me, he is more important to me than the business, but we have to face facts. If I ever have any hopes of that young man going to a wonderful college and having all the opportunities in the world that I've had, then that means business comes first, because my business is first. That's how I take care of my son first. There's nothing more important than commitment to family, no question. The way you take care of your family is that you excel in your career, business, profession, whatever it is that you do to support your family.
What personal sacrifices have you had to make in order to reach your career goals? Any friendships lost or anything else in that regard?
Well, you know, people ask me this question all the time. I guess you want me to sit around and cry in my beer. Oh, I could have been married. I could have had this. I could have gone out. Forget it. Forget it. As far as I'm concerned, I didn't make any sacrifices. You see, in reality, Stu, what I believe is that I've done exactly what I wanted to do, when I wanted to do it, with whom I wanted to do it. And as far as I can see, I didn't sacrifice anything. Now, if I had not pursued what I was in pursuit of, if I had not come to Washington, if I had not tried to establish my own business, if I had not tried to hold the politicians accountable for how we were voting back home, if I had not dragged my son up here and said, by God, you're going to the Smithsonian and you're going to see the President of the United States and you're going to know that your vote counts. If I had not pursued this dream, then I would have sacrificed. The truth of the matter is, I haven't sacrificed at all.
What kind of special challenges do you think you faced being a woman?
Well, gosh, you know, I can remember the day, Miss Reedy, when I carried the flag for the state of Texas here in Washington when we had the Equal Rights Amendment March. I carried it for the state of Texas. And I was really under the impression, and I guess maybe I am still, I was really under the impression that women were, that, you know, people practice prejudice against us. Yeah, it's been so long. It's been so long. I mean, now that we're really into the thick of it, hey, nobody practices prejudice against me because I'm a woman. If anything, I probably get a couple of breaks now and then because they just are shocked out of their mind that a woman would even dare to do what I'm trying to do. They're intimidated by that a little bit, I think. But let me think here, and I'm reflecting for a moment. Now, I have had politicians for just a fleeting moment be patronizing. Like they would talk to me like I was little old Southern belle, and maybe I didn't know too much about the immigration law. Please, So it's just for a fleeting moment that maybe they have discriminated against me, but it certainly didn't last long. And you know, let me tell you something. Intelligent people recognize intelligent people. Intelligent people recognize dumb people. Discrimination has nothing to do with your sex or with your color, with how you look. But I am convinced it has everything to do with your intellect. And if you're dumb, people are going to discriminate against you, no question.
Where do you see yourself a couple years from now for the future? What goals have you set for yourself?
I definitely want this business to make it big time. Big time. I want the television station with whom we work to think that they would call us before they would call anybody else to get what they need out of Washington. I also want the politicians to stand back and be in awe. When we call up, when Sun World Satellite News calls up, I want it to get exactly the same response that ABC Nightline gets when it calls.
Just step back for a moment. If you were coming to Washington in the fall of 1986, and what you know now, based on the past 5.5, 6 years, would you do anything differently in starting up a new company and in being a manager?
No, I wouldn't.
Have the times changed in the last 6 years, you think, would life have been a little easier had you started the company now as opposed to 86 for being...
No, just the opposite. Oh, no, because now it's extremely competitive. I came, oh yes, in our, yeah.
What about for you as a woman coming to Washington, starting a company? Were there barriers that you had to overcome in 1980 that probably you wouldn't have to overcome now because they're no longer there?
I'm sorry, I just don't think so. I think the same barriers that existed then in starting a business exist now. It has nothing to do with my sex. Not at all. Any man trying to do what I do would have exactly the same problems. If anything, I probably have a little bit more slack cut to me because I'm a woman. No difference, really. I mean, starting a business, Stu, is tough. It ain't easy. It's tough. It's tough. It's very rewarding, but it is tough.
We have just a moment or two left. Any additional final wrap-up comments you want to say about the ability to lead in this country as far as what a manager should and shouldn't do? Or
Well, I'll tell you what, I have the main reason that I want to become a very successful businesswoman is because I want to acquire enough of a financial background that someday I could run for Congress. And I'm looking forward to the day that I can stand up in Congress and say to the men in the rotunda, in the chambers, now listen, guys, your mothers would be horrified if they saw you voting the way you're voting today. And let's start with the budget. Because you see, I believe that if more women were in Congress, we would not have the deficit problem that we have. We wouldn't be constantly in these international troubles that we're in. A woman knows how to feed a family of 5 on $80 a month. A woman knows how to do the maximum amount of work with the minimum amount of help, both at home and in the office. That's a sexist thing for me to say, but I truly do believe that. What would I say about leadership skills? What would I recommend? Don't be afraid. Listen to the people with whom you work. Listen to the people who you're trying to lead, because more often than not, they'll show you the way to lead.
Thank you very much, Cynthia, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.